Well, earlier this morning, President Trump turned his attention to Europe after the European Central Bank cut one of its key interest rates for the first time since 2016, pushing it into record negative territory. President Trump reacted to that news on Twitter this morning, saying European Central Bank acting quickly cuts rates 10 basis points. They're trying and succeeding in depreciating the euro against the very strong dollar. And the Fed sits and sits and sits. They get paid to borrow money. We are paying interest. Joining us now from London is Yahoo Finance's Oscar Williams-Grut. Leaving aside for a moment the fact that the European economy, this is not helping them by any perceptible measure, but leaving that aside for a moment, Oscar, talk to us about exactly what the ECB did.
Well, as you said there, the two major announcements today we had from Mario Draghi. Firstly, the cut to the deposit rate for banks. It was cut by 10 basis points to 0.5%, negative 0.5%. And that was the first cut since 2016. Now, the other big announcement was the return of quantitative easing. Draghi announced that the ECB will be purchasing assets at a rate of 20 billion euros a month from November. And interestingly, for the first time ever, this program does not have an end date. This is an open-ended buying initiative intended to try and stimulate the economy. ING had a nice phrase for it, saying that Draghi, in his penultimate announcement as ECB chief, has added as long as it takes to his famous phrase, whatever it takes.
Oscar, we're going to keep talking about this, whatever it takes, with the panel. Thank you. Paul, how does Europe turn this around? Because the bang for your buck that you used to get with these measures doesn't necessarily pay off anymore, does it?
So as I like to say, it's not what the news is, it's how the market reacts. So the euro's rallying on this news, which obviously President Trump is not correct on. Clearly, it's only a couple-hour move. It's so funny. Draghi came in with unconventional means, did all this stuff, we'll call it, with no real impact. And let's not talk about the counterfactual, like Trichet is trying to do now, doing his victory tour. I'm not sure how he declares victory, but Draghi's going to leave worse than when he came. He left Europe in tatters. I don't know how they can argue that all their plans are working when Germany, in my opinion, is in a recession. I've said that for 6 months. Italy is right there. Europe is teetering. This is not working. They are headed for...
But he's sort of acknowledging that, is he not? He's saying fiscal policy needs to step in here because monetary policy is not doing it.
That's like you getting the flu shot every year. Every single year you get a flu shot, and every year the flu gets worse and worse for you. This is what they're doing. I mean, this is the most I think our Fed is misguided. Our Fed is a bunch of superstars compared to what the ECB is doing. They are going to drive Europe into almost a Japan-like decade or multiple decades.
So they shouldn't be doing stimulus then?
The negative interest rate are not working. They're not going to work. European banks are on their rear end and getting worse. So they are headed for a currency crisis, the likes of which the world has never seen. This is not the answer.
Of all sorts. I mean, I agree with this distinction you just made, Julie, with monetary and fiscal policy. Monetary policy is dead. I mean, it's dead. And by the way, the chickens are going to come home to roost. We haven't seen the results of what all this is going to lead to. And it's coming, and the only thing that's going to dig us out of the hole is fiscal policy. In other words, we're going to have to cut spending or start to, have infrastructure projects. I mean, it's going to have to be addressed by not the central banks, but the leaders of these countries, including our own.
But in Europe, you have the haves and the have-nots. Germany doesn't really care about Italy or France. I mean, they've got a surplus. They're surplusing their way right into recession without providing the stimulus needed. Frankly, you want to know the answer? The answer is the euro doesn't work. The answer is you get rid of the euro currency. And in the backroom conspiracy corners, and they're all talking about the fact that most of these countries probably have their own currencies printed and waiting to go for years. This is not working. They eventually have to recognize that.
How eventually, I guess, is the question. That's been a line for years, Paul, so we'll see.